remember some of his life story so that we can record it for everybody to enjoy. His dad has some wonderful memories, so you want to start at the beginning, Dad?
Yeah, my wonderful memories are shorter than I'd like. It's kind of hard to go back to school days and others with any degree of accuracy. And but anyhow, if there are questions that you might want answered, that I think I'd be able to do it. And
Great.
as you said, I was born in 1919 on October the 17th, and the early days until I went to school. I went to school at age, first grade, so age 6, I guess it was, and went to Catholic school, St. Cecilia's School in Baltimore, Maryland. And that school is still there. They still have students. It's when I was there, of course, it was all white students, and now I believe it's changed. Now all the students are black students, and but the school is still there and still the same. And every few years, Ann and I used to visit the school and visit her school too, just for old times' sake.
How did you get to school back then? Did they have school buses, or did you
Oh,
walk?
no school buses in 20, early 20s. No, you walked to school, and it was about 5 or 6 blocks to walk. And of course, we go to, it was a Catholic school attached to St. Cecilia's Church. So going to church was an important part of being a student there. And I went there 8 years, 8 grades. And in the beginning it was easy, and I started to have struggling when I got to about the 6th grade. The subjects were a little farther along than my mentality was prepared for. So I started to struggle in school when I got to about the 6th and 7th grade. So, but it was a parochial school, and they were all nuns, and they were very strict. And you didn't have many excuses for not doing your homework.
Did you ever get in trouble with those nuns?
Yeah, I'm afraid I have to admit that in about the 4th grade, I guess. I was part of a group of young boys of that class that the teacher called us outlaws.
Oh,
No.
you're the original outlaw.
Yeah, there were about 4 or 5 of us. And for some reason, we were always in some kind of trouble. Either throwing stones at the windows or doing some things that you weren't excused. So I was punished frequently. And the punishment in those days were the nuns had the whips made of cat and 9 tails. Maybe that bush is no longer popular, but there was
Thank goodness.
It was like a wisp with these little burrs on them.
How'd that feel?
Really hurt. So in the 4th grade, when the time came for me to get a new pair of shoes, I convinced my parents to get me a pair of boots. With that leather boot. I didn't tell them why, but I said, everybody wears boots now in my class, so although they didn't go by that and what other people were doing,
Right.
they did buy me a pair of boots, and it wasn't too long, and I was subject to some whippings. But by that time, I had long pants instead of short ones. So I covered up the leather boots with my pants until the nuns got wind of it, realized that they weren't getting the benefit of the whips. But I was one of the outlaws. There was about 4 or 5 of us, all boys, of course. And we went through 2 or 3 years of that, of being the school's outlaws. This was only 4th, 5th, maybe 6th grade. And I wasn't exactly proud of it, but I wasn't ashamed of it either. I felt like I really was a boy then, one of the gangs.
Yeah, that's good.
And I was only a fair student. If I would study the way I was supposed to, I would have been a much better student. But, you know, when you're with a bunch of guys and you're in a certain element, you're not expected to be as smart as the girls. Most of this classes, the girls were the smartest ones.
Oh.
And once in a while, a boy might move up to 3rd or 4th place, but most of the best students were, in the eyes of the nuns anyhow, were girls. And of course, boys and girls in those early ages didn't mix well. I guess it wasn't until about the 6th or 7th grade that I ever gave a Valentine's. Every Valentine's Day we'd give cards, and you'd buy comic cards for the boys. If you had some couple boyfriends that were especially friendly to you, you'd buy them a card. But for the girls, you would get something that had something to do with favorite or special or something like that. Never the word love on it. Nothing like that. Not in the Catholic schools.
Who did you send your first Valentine to? Do you remember?
I don't remember the girl, but undoubtedly there's one that didn't send me one. I don't think I ever got a card in those years from a girl. I just wasn't the popular boy at those days. And, matter of fact, they didn't mix as closely then anyhow. The boys all had their games and friends, and the boys and the girls had theirs. Usually didn't mix. I guess it wasn't until maybe the 8th grade that we didn't have a dance, but we'd have a party where the girls and boys would mix a little more together. Not till about the 8th grade.
Do you remember some of the games you would play as a child? I'm trying to think if they were different than what the kids today play.
Baseball.
I think, you know, most of them the boys played were athletically connected. Either, you know, hit and run, or you'd hit somebody and then they'd have to chase after them.
Like tag?
Yeah,
tag,
but a form of tag.
Chase.
Which is a little more rough or rougher than the girls might have played.
Like kick the can or some
That's right.
things.
Kick the can would be another one.
Okay. You can turn
Can't
it off.
think of it.
Huh?
Can't
Off.
Yeah, turn it off, please. Oh, that was interesting. I didn't know about you being a rascal in elementary school. I was too. So we're going to move on to high school. And what was the name of your high school and how did you get there?
That's a good point. There's a couple ways you got there. I went to even though I graduated from a Catholic elementary school, that was 1933. Depression had hit my family
Oh,
very hard financially, and my parents couldn't afford to pay Catholic high school tuition, more expensive. So I went to what was well known in Baltimore as the best, academically best school, and it was a public school, called Baltimore Polytechnic Institute, BPI. Everybody called it Poly,
okay.
so we were Poly. And they didn't take everybody, but they took pretty much everybody from Catholic schools. And so I was accepted there, and the class would have been 4 years later. The class of 1937 would be the normal graduating class of somebody that went in when I went in. And I thought I had been getting a very good education from the nuns in elementary school, and I found out that by selecting Poly, I went way beyond my capabilities. You don't know that till you get there. And I wasn't ready for some of the math courses and engineering courses. They were really difficult. So either the first or second year, I failed the whole semester. I just couldn't grasp it all. So I had to repeat one semester, half a year. And so that put me back to the 1938 graduation. But I found out that, some of the basic subjects of the elementary school, which was spelling and history and math, some of those I did pretty well in, but not something that I had to start entirely new in learning about. Just trying to think of some trigonometry and
All those engineering type things.
and engineering, and I can't think of all the names of the courses now, but they were difficult, and I was completely unprepared for them. And instead of studying twice as hard, I just said, well, sooner or later I guess I'll learn it. So I didn't study hard enough to move right out in 4 years. So I had to repeat one half of a year, one semester on the way up. And one of them was solid geometry, electricity, and surveying.
Wow.
SS, yeah. They were the 3 courses I failed in.
Because you never had that before. That was totally new.
And I really wasn't, my mind wasn't really set to learn all the intricacies of engineering and all that went with it. And it, physics and geometry and solid geometry, none of those, I was ready to comprehend. So my high school days were a little more difficult. My parents weren't quite understanding how I got it done reasonably well in Catholic school, and I didn't do very well in a difficult high school. So it took a while for them to get used to the idea that don't look for A's. If you see a D, don't get upset about it. And so it took a while for that, because they thought I was pretty smart. And I learned I really wasn't that smart, because when I was put out to test with good students, now Polly did draw some of the best students from elementary schools.
It. Yeah.
And so when you went there, you were out of your league from where you were in Catholic high school.
Well, do you remember some of the friends you had at high school there? Did you make some good friends?
Oh,
at
sure.
Poly?
Yeah. A couple of them, we stayed friends for probably the whole 4 years. And of course, when you're a freshman, sophomore, junior, you're kind of young to have girlfriends. A few of the guys had girlfriends by the junior year. And I didn't finally have a girlfriend until I was in my senior year. And she was a girl that lived in the neighborhood, and she went to public school. So that was my first experience of a date when I was in senior in high school.
Oh, you were like 18 years old?
Yeah.
Your first date?
And she was shall I say, she was the kind of a mother of a boy doesn't particularly like to see her son dating.
Oh.
First, you're not Catholic. And second, she was, I guess we'll call it well endowed. And that was right away a negative of my mother's. My mother particularly was more so than my father. He kind of figured I could take care of things for myself. And so it was a difficult relationship. And I never brought her to my house to meet my mother. She had met her, but only in the neighborhood.
Uh-huh.
So I didn't have a very supportive family when it came to my first girlfriend. And anyhow, then when I graduated from high school in 1938, I was one of the few who did not go on to college right from senior year of high school. And I just had reached the peak of my ability or my desire to learn enough. As a matter of fact, my father's printing company printed the yearbook for the high
college?
school. Yeah. And as such, he also printed the yearbook for the University of Maryland. So he got to know the faculty and the staff very well, and they convinced him that I should go to Maryland. Well, in fact, I even met the dean of the engineering school, and I passed by him all right because he said, if you're from Poly, you can make it. And then by that time, I had a girlfriend I just mentioned about, and so studies became very secondary. I didn't do a lot of studying. So by the time I graduated, my grades were not very good. I had to go to summer school to get enough credits to graduate. Well, right away, that didn't help me at all to get into a select group in college. So I convinced my father that I wasn't college material, and no use of spending money or expecting a scholarship even in his favorite college. And so I didn't go to college. I went out and got a job right after I graduated from high school. So, and I never had a great desire to go to college because I didn't think I was the right material for graduating. So, so for the next 4 years, instead of going to college, I went to work.
Okay.
Yep.
That's an awful lot. So
What was your first girlfriend's name? I forget.
Dorothy Blanchard was her
And
name.
she was your neighbor.
And she lived right around the corner from my house. And she was very popular with all the young boys at that time. And so,
You felt pretty lucky, huh?
yeah. Yeah, and was I gonna say?
That, about going to school after that. You probably
Yeah,
didn't want
she
to
went-
leave, you didn't want
She
to
went
leave
to a
her.
public school,
Mhm.
and
Going off to college, you
You-
didn't really want to go.
no, I didn't. I really didn't think I had the capability of graduating from college.
What was your first job? What was your first job? Out of high school? Was it with a,
Did you work with your dad's printing company?
No,
was it with the, Hughes? Aircraft or,
I have trouble. It's something I always remember, but now
that's okay.
I stumble on it. It'll come to me later. My first job. Yeah, I went to work for Putzler's department store, which was at a high level or upper income
Fancy
department
store, yeah.
Baltimore, and I think I got the job mainly because the woman who interviewed me knew my brother, my older brother, who dated her occasionally. So she got to know my family somewhat. So when I applied for a job along with several others, she hired me for the job. And my first job was in the, not the perfume, what do you call the perfume department?
Cosmetics? or-
Cosmetic department
Okay.
of Hutzler's in Baltimore. And one of my jobs was to go around to other competitive stores, other department stores, and to find out if anybody was selling the products that I'd have a list of them cheaper, or any special
Promotions?
promotions they were putting on. That was my job. I
A spy.
I was a shopper. They didn't call me a spy, but that's what it was. Because they didn't know. Here I was, what was that, 18 years old or 19 years old. I'd go to Stewart and Company. When the people there didn't know that I was a shopper. I was some kid. That's all. And I'd just look at the prices. I wouldn't stop and interview the clerks. But anyway, that was my first job. And then, of course, you always have to learn how to wrap packages. So I was a wrapper. WRAPPER.
The first rapper in the family.
That's right. And I liked the job a lot because it was interesting. You're working with all adults, and some of the people were very nice, and so you had a chance to feel important in that you were going out representing your department store and checking the competition. So I think I held that job for about a year. And then I read that the defense industry, this was 1939 now, was hiring people to build airplanes at the Glen L. Martin Aircraft Company. And they were favoring anybody who had engineering or math backgrounds. So I said, and they were going to pay much more money than the department store.
Do you remember how much?
Yeah, they were going to pay 40 cents an hour.
Wow.
Which is $16 a week for a 40-hour week.
Wow.
And I thought that was really something, even though I used to get a discount for buying things at Hutzler's as an employee, it still made the job with Martin to start at 40 cents an hour. That was good pay in those days. And so that I took that job, and I had to work at the night shift, midnight till 8 in the morning. That's the only openings they had, and I said,
Oh, wow.
if I don't take this job, I won't get one. And there's always a hope that they could transfer me to the day job sometime.
Right.
And eventually they did. So I did well enough at night to earn a credit for doing good work. And all I was doing was riveting airplane wings.
That's
on
important.
a B-26 aircraft, one of the real all-stars of World War II. That was one of the fighters that were built for the Air Force. It weren't called the Air Force, it was the United States Air Corps in those days.
Oh.
So they changed the name to Air Force a few years later
Oh, I didn't
as
know
a
that.
separate body. It weren't part of the Army.
Uh-huh.
So it was good, and I liked my job at Martin. I was promoted to a pusher. Well, I call them pushers. It was like a group leader. And it so turns out that all they were hiring then were women.
Mm-hmm.
And women needed somebody in charge to show them how to do these things. And so I ended up with about 8 or 10 women under my supervision.
Were those Rosie the Riveters? Rosie
Yeah,
the
that's how
Riveters?
that's how Rosie the Riveter song became popular.
Mm-hmm.
Because most of the men were being called into the service. I was given a deferment because I was in a critical industry.
Mm-hmm.
And so every 6 months, they would renew it and say, he can't go in because he's
Mm-hmm.
important to the war effort.
Right, that's how you're serving, yeah.
And I stayed there until 1943. And in 1943, they needed soldiers too badly to be able to continue that. So they eliminated all the deferments and drafted everybody who was been held back all that time. So I was drafted, and I expected to be put in the Air Force. So by that time, I think it was called the Air Force. And instead of that, because they were short of infantry troops overseas, I happened to get drafted at the time, or selected at the time, where that was a priority. All the new ones coming in didn't go into the Air Force or Air Corps, it went into the infantry, and that's what happened to me. Everybody in the group that I was drafted from went into the infantry, and I was sent, my first assignment was to Camp Walters in Texas, near Fort Worth, Texas. So here's somebody who'd never been out of the city of Baltimore in their life, and always kind of a homer, they call you when you just stick at your home. Here I get sent, I don't know, what's that, 2,000 miles away to Texas in the middle of the summer. It was 110 degrees down there.
Wow.
And on top of that, being the infantry, carrying ammunition, carrying guns, and burning under the hot sun. Couldn't have been a worse assignment, but that's where everybody went in the period I was brought in. You didn't have any choice. They interviewed you when you came in, and you tell them again, or I told them, I said, I spent 5 years now with the Martin Company building airplanes, and I think it would be beneficial to both sides here if I were assigned to the Air Corps. And that's, well, it makes sense, sounds good. he knew all along. He knew all along where I was going.
Oh.
Everybody that came in at that time went in. And So as soon as I got in, they were asking for people to volunteer to become officers.
Oh,
Go
you
to officers training,
volunteered?
Officers candidate school. And I applied for that. I said, well, you know, I've got enough background, I've got pretty good education. I think I'd like to sign up for that. And so I was interviewed for that job. And I thought I did pretty well in the interview. And even though I stumbled on a few questions. And so the decision came down, I was denied because I lacked the ability to command troops. I don't know how they found that out. Some of the questions and answers. And a lack of sufficient technical knowledge to fulfill the job of an infantry officer. I don't know why, they had so many applications. Everybody wanted to go in the Air Corps when you were in the infantry especially. So I was denied the opportunity, or I didn't earn the opportunity. And so that's why I finished my training down in Texas. And when that was over, then I was transferred to California. It was not far from Los Angeles, and it was like going to heaven from hell. From Texas, the heat and the jungles in Texas, to the beautiful flowers and everything else in California. Even you didn't have them on the base, but that seemed like a good break for me. But I was still in the infantry. And then after 17 weeks of training there, how to shoot, how to set up camp, all the other things you learn to do. I was given orders to go to, they won't tell you where you're going. To join the group that ships out from San Francisco. So I had to go, and they got a 10-day, what they call a delay en route. I had 10 days to get from San Francisco to Los Angeles to get a ship. And so, of course, I took the time to go home. It took 2 days to get from California to Baltimore, and then 2 more days to get from Baltimore to Los Angeles. So out of my 10 days, I lost about 4 just traveling back and forth or waiting in stations. However, that was able to fly both ways. They sent you by the fastest transportation.
Good.
So that's about the only benefit I got from it.
Stop a second.
Was it difficult for you? You only had 10 days to get from the West Coast to the East Coast and say goodbye to your wife and family, and then get back to California. How were your feelings then?
Yeah, she couldn't come with me. They wouldn't pay her fare, so I had to leave her in Baltimore. Yeah, in fact, I hadn't referred to her at all.
I know.
At this point, this was all been about the service.
Yes, that's okay.
Leaving my job and going into the service.
That's okay.
So I guess we ought to back up, and you don't have to back this up, but okay. In discussing my activities around World War II and working, and then being drafted into the service after being deferred, I haven't included Anne in my remarks at all. And that was very important because we hadn't been married very long. And so this was a real blow, even though I expected someday to be called in, but we wanted to get married anyhow, so we went ahead and we were married in June of,
August.
I'm sorry, August
August 17th?
of 1943.
19.
43, yeah. And then so it wasn't much longer after that I was drafted into service, less than a year. And which was really very,
Awful.
very, very hard on Anne. She was then, by that time, pregnant with Michael, our oldest son. And of all times, if a wife needs a mother-to-be, a wife needs some support at home. It says when I had to leave, and I was able to get one short deferment, but then after that it was canceled. There was no further deferment because they were taking people, married people with children at that time. So this was extremely hard on her. By that time we were living in a separate apartment, and the first thing she did was that her parents invited her to come back to their home, and while I'm gone. And so hard as it was, to break up our relationship after just a short time was very hard, and much harder on her than it was on me. I was doing something new, and she'd always have to watch the news and learn how to, what's going on in the service. And so it was very, very hard on her. So I kept in touch with her regularly, either by phone or by letter. And so we kept close that whole time. But when I was sent to the West Coast, I had to go alone. She couldn't go. She had to stay back. They wouldn't pay her fare up there. And by the time I got in the service, it wasn't their concern that I have a family back home. That wasn't their worry. That was my worry, not the Army. And so, but she became a very strong person and handled everything very well. We correspond almost daily. Almost every day I'd write to her, and she'd write to me at least 2 or 3 times a week.
I know she saved all those letters and put them in a scrapbook.
Yeah,
Read some.
most of those letters were we still have. She kept, and I've kept them too. There's still many of the letters that I wrote then, and also during the war when I was in service there.
It's beautiful. Were you able to
Is
see?
that on now? No, it's off.
So,
Were you able to see Michael before you went overseas to the war? Did you get to see your son?
Yeah, they gave me a deferment,
Oh, good.
10 days, about 3 days after he was born. The 10 days
Mm-hmm.
started, so he was about 7 days old when I left. And that was tough. Mom came to the Fort Meade, and she came down there to see me before I shipped out to California.
Oh,
So they were really hard times, especially
boy.
on her. She became a very, very strong person. She put up with a lot. And worried about the war, she'd read about, we weren't doing so well in the early parts of the war. So it was a very hard time. I think it strengthened her and made her a stronger person. Never doubted, neither one of us never doubted that I'd be coming back. And even when times are tough, we never gave up the hope or the idea that I would be back. I'd write that in my letters.
That's called faith.
Yeah,
We had a lot of faith.
yeah, we did, yeah.